Good morning on this beautiful Sunshine Sunday here in Santa Cruz, California, and welcome to everyone out there and Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube, and everyone here in person, which is so exciting. So the talk title today is Boldly Living a New Story. Well, I want to share something with you. Back in the 80s, I worked for a woman named Reverend Terry Cole Whitaker. And it was mandatory when you were on staff to attend the S training for the weekend and the S training for a week long, called 7-day training. And may I say, it was very interesting. It was a time where this gentleman, Warner Earhart, took together what he had learned from the military, from psychology and neuro-linguistic programming, and also from Scientology. And he put together this program that was arduous and really challenged people's egos. What I remember most about it, and the gift that I came away with it, was they took people to a place where you had to let go of your old story. And I remember if you started to tell your story and tell your drama, then they would cut you off and say, "Thank you for sharing," which meant to shut up, right? And I'll never forget those words. "Thank you for sharing." Next, But one of the exercises that we did do that I still remember was we got into partners and we were asked to describe who we were without using the fact that we are male or female, the fact that you were somebody's mother, daughter, sister, wife, or that you had children or a husband, or that you were a teacher or a nurse, any kind of profession. You weren't allowed to use any of that. You were left with very little to explain who you were. But that was very challenging because you had to start thinking a little bit deeper about who you were. If you weren't all the labels, I'm Tamara, I was an instructor at college, I'm a mother, how do you explain who you are? I'm a reverend, all these labels. And my students who have developmental disabilities always told me, we only label jars, we don't label people. So I remember that really well. So I have 3 things that I want to share with you about boldly living a new story. Number one of the 3 things is know and remember who you are. And that is the topic I'm going to discuss today. But however, I want to share with you what number 2 and 3 is for a future date. Number 2 is to let go of your old story, which is a process. We're very attached to our old story. It defines us. Who are we? If we just go on the material world view, we label ourselves. But if we look deeper, we find a different answer. And number 3 was to choose your new story with intention. And again, that's another Sunday. So there's an old Spanish proverb that says, "Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken." So who are we anyway? Well, we are the life essence behind all things. The essence that is never born and never dies. We are the intelligence that exists before thought. And I found this so amazing, I'm going to read this twice to you. To remember who we are, we must know that we cannot get there through our thinking mind. Now that's a huge one for us here in, shall I say, the philosophy of possibility thinking. It's like, what? I'm going to read that to you again. To remember who we are, we must know we cannot get there through our thinking mind. We must awaken out of our mind. We must awaken out of the mind, or our mind, into our intuitive heart, where there we will awaken. In our intuitive heart is where we will awaken. I think we've fallen asleep. We have fallen into an agreement on our material worldview of perceptions and labels. We follow false perceptions more than our intuition and our instinct. And that intuition and instinct is always tapping us on the shoulder. It's always calling us back to what is true, our true nature, which is love and the space within our heart. And when I speak of love, I don't mean hearts and flowers and just the romantic love. It's the deep fabric of who we are. The songs this morning, I'm a Place Where God Shows Up by Eddie Watkins, and by Karen Drucker, You Are the Face of God, speaks about that oneness. Ram Dass says, every person is God. Yes, Ram Dass says every person is God, in drag. I love that one. I'm going to share a story that I have shared from the podium before, but I think it's really apropos. And it's by Reverend Jim Rosemergy, and he wrote a book called A Prayer That God Prays. And he speaks of being a reverend in a Unity temple for over 20 years. And during that time, he had a remarkable awakening. This mother and daughter, I'm going to call the daughter Karen, came to church faithfully for many years, over a decade. And at this time, Karen was 19 years old. She was a young lady with Down syndrome. And as every sermon ended and the church was, everyone was leaving out the back door, Reverend Jim would be there to greet everyone. And every Sunday, Karen would come up to Reverend Jim and kiss him on the cheek and say, "I love you, God." And he said he was embarrassed because she was calling him God. And, he felt uncomfortable about that. But just like clockwork, every Sunday, Karen would come up, kiss his cheek, and say, "I love you, God." And so feeling uncomfortable, he said, "I need to take this to prayer." So Reverend Jim took it to prayer. And he said what came out of it is he thought, oh my goodness, he can understand where Karen got the idea that he was God, because the mother said, "We're going to go this morning to God's house, and you're going to listen to God's message." And of course, Reverend Jim was the one giving the message, so he must be God. And he said, as he went deeper in prayer, he realized here was this young lady who thought she was in the presence of God and everything she had ever heard about God. And every Sunday, she would give him a kiss on the cheek and say, "I love you, God." Never once, knowing that she was in the presence of God, did she ever ask him for anything or question anything like, why am I like this and not like everybody else? Why doesn't God bring me more things? Here, in the presence of God, all Karen wanted to do was tell God out of gratefulness that she loved him. And he realized as he went deeper that, yes, I am God. And not to be blasphemous, of course, but we all are part of God. And with that came his awakening to understanding and being able to explain to people, I'm a place where God shows up. I am the face of God. And that story always just tugged at my heartstrings. If I was in the presence of the old traditional ideology of God, what would we say? Would be in gratitude or in the complaint line? So remembering who we are, this is so important in boldly telling a new story. Accessing who we are, our inner wisdom, is spoken through our intuition. Our rational mind and our ego must acquiesce to our intuitive wisdom of the heart. However, since we are in a human body, They are meant to travel hand in hand. There is a reason why we have an ego. There is a reason we have a mind. That is a reason why we focus on our thoughts to manifest things. And our foundation must be our spiritual foundation. Alan Cohen says that time is an invention of our mortality. Time is an invention of our mortality to teach us and itself our divinity. To teach itself our divinity. We are here as spiritual beings having a human experience to learn about our divinity. That's what I think. Our new story for a spiritual evolution must boldly go where no thinking mind can go. It must go to our true nature, our spiritual nature. Remembering and knowing who we are takes practice, and it takes awareness of our soul, and to remember that all our work is holy. It is holy ground in which we stand. Our connection with spirit sustains us with every breath we take, and we need to remember our divinity. We enter this world with a breath, the breath of life in this material form, and we transition out of this body with a breath. And my mother used to tell me, and you know, Tamara, we don't know what's on the other side. So in your next breath, after your last breath, what do you want to carry with you into the next expression? And that made me think a lot. Remembering and knowing who we are comes through us in many ways and many forms. And I like this because Sky was sharing about the monarch butterfly on the flowers at Cheryl's house and the wonderful food that Alice made. And Emerson says nature is not a commodity, but a living spiritual essence in all nature that we intuitively can communicate with. Many people find their connection to their essence and remembering who they are through nature. That is a wonderful way, spending time in nature. And one of the most important things I find in awakening oneself is to find a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice is a must in boldly living a new story. For remembering and knowing who we are, we have affirmations. We have practitioners who learn how to pray. We have so many things. We have music that touches our heart and bypasses some of that cerebral, intellectual thinking that can get us into our ego very quickly. You know, who are you? And finding a spiritual practice just deepens us so much more quickly, and it keeps us on track in alignment with where we want to go, how we want to live, with more love, with more happiness, with more joy. In the book, How God Changes Your Brain by Newberg and Walden, they talk about a 25-year study about meditation all over the world, from Buddhist monks in Tibet to a Philadelphia construction worker who they had learned through Dr. Daniel Amen's brain scans that now they can see the activity of the brain, how meditation affects the brain. They have published medical journals with kids with autism, people with stress, etc., etc. That meditation, going into the silence, is a spiritual practice, no matter what spiritual path you're on. Christianity, Hinduism, being a Muslim, being Jewish, Hindu, it doesn't matter. It's the practice. And the practice with intention. This gentleman who wasn't particularly religious, didn't go to church, he was a construction worker in Philadelphia. They told him to find an intention because he was so stressed out, he was having heart problems, to find a loving intention and to meditate on it. And he only had to meditate for 12 minutes a day for 8 weeks. 12 minutes a day for 8 weeks with a spiritual intention of peace, love, something that you want to have more of in your life. And the brain scans were off the charts. He felt better. His heart problems went away. It was truly amazing. That is the power of remembering who we are through a spiritual practice. I want to share a very profound experience that I had in ministerial school. It probably was one of the most defining moments of my spiritual growth in ministerial school. I hope I can put words to it that will make you understand how deep it was for me. I grew up in religious science, and a lot of times it has always been about prosperity is your divine right. It's about me, and me. There's no one else in the room. And as we evolved, we became about we. And we went to more of a global heart. And we're talking about a world that works for everyone. This is the evolutionary process so we don't become a dinosaur, as many religions are struggling with. It is now we. We care about the world that we live in, and we recognize always that we are one. And what happens to one happens to us at some visceral level. I wanted to read the Science of Mind text from front to back. I thought that might be what I was going to do in ministerial school, which it felt like it sometimes. But the most important thing happened during an exercise in a class. It was given by Dr. Kim Kaiser. He was the dean of our school. And it was very simple, and you can try this at home. He said, I want you to close your eyes and go into silence, and so I did. And he said, I want you to visualize an empty chair in front of you. Okay, that's easy. Visualize an empty chair. And he says, you can choose anyone you want to talk to that's either alive or no longer living here on this planet, and put them in the chair. So he gave us several minutes, and I got Ernest Holmes in the chair next to me, looking at him, smiling back at me. And he says, now I want you to think of a really important question that you have, that you want answered. It's like, wow, cool. Okay. So we had I think it was about 4 or 5 minutes more to decide what the question was. And boom, I got the question. Boom, shakalaka, like I got it. And so I got the question, and I was so excited. So we got to write the question down. And I'm thinking, my teacher's going to answer the question, right? I got the question. He took our questions. He's going to pull it out of a hat. So he pulled all the questions out of the hat, and he reads them, and he goes, that's great. Now go home and find the answer. I'm like, what? Go home and find it. I thought you were going to answer it for me. Very Buddhist, right? He used to be a Buddhist monk. Anyway, I was like, oh man, how am I going to find the answer? If I knew the answer, I wouldn't ask the question, right? Of course, that was my logic. So I go home and I pray and I meditate, and day goes by, nothing happened, another day goes by, and I'm drawn to my bookshelf, and I pull out a book, and I just open it up. I'm sure everyone has done that sometime in their life, right? They want an answer, and they open a book, and there it is, right? And there it is. Page 10, paragraph 2. And I was like, wow. And all of a sudden, I had this deepening that I hadn't recognized in the same way after I read this. My question was, how does the science of mind work with those who have intellectual disabilities? And it always bothered me that we are so heady sometimes. Nothing wrong with being a little heady intellectual, but that doesn't always attract things. So we need to, when we teach our children principles, we need to break them down to the simplest form. And that's kind of how I learn. Make it simple. And it was really important to me. This beautiful, wonderful philosophy that has changed my life. By changing my thinking, I changed my life. What I remember the most about it is the teen camps where I got loved, where I come to a community like here in Santa Cruz, and I'm loved. And I realized that is just one layer of who we are, is the community and the love and the acknowledgement that we are all one. And for my kids, I just really wanted them, because, I start talking and they're like, Oh my God. Yeah. So how does one do that? And here's the quote from Ernest Holmes in Can We Talk to God, page 10, paragraph 2. God speaks in a language more subtle than the human language, a language without a tongue. In that universal language of spiritual emotion, which is instinctive in human nature and held in common by all civilization, by all creation, by all people who have ever lived. The universal language of emotion, of sense, of feeling, of intuition, and of instinct. That turned me on my head going, yes. That is why we have our spiritual practices and remembering who we are. It is by design, not merit, that we understand that we are one, that we are the face of God, that we are a place where God shows up, lives and has its being. That as expressions, we know intuitively and instinctively that we are one. When we quiet our ego-thinking mind, that mind can take us on a Disneyland ride that has never been ridden before. It can take us into the depths of hell or the heights of heaven. But it's temporary because thoughts aren't the only thing we live by. We live by remembering and knowing instinctively and intuitively who we are. And we are part of a bigger understanding of what love is, the fabric of our being, and how compassion and kindness usually is the rule of every religion. It's because it's the truth of our true nature. Right now, I would like to have you join me in a meditation. I'm going to ring the bowl 3 times, and I'm going to set the stage for you to think about boldly living a new story by setting up the table for you in your thinking mind. And then allowing you to sit with it in silence, to go deeper to your intuitive, instinctual self. And hopefully the combination will bring you an idea to boldly tell and live a new story. So, if you would like, please close your eyes. And I will ring the bell 3 times and then share the meditation. As you close your eyes and open your mind and heart, look with your inner vision to this transformational adventure called your life. This amazing adventure of your life is now being filled with infinite possibilities. You are entering into an exploration of an expanded and empowered life. As you follow your vision, you will be discovering of your individual place in the universe. The answers you are looking for will unfold on this amazing course of your soul's inspiring journey. You are here to create a launching pad for your journey into a life grounded and rooted with unconditional love. All things in your life are here to support your visions of infinite possibilities, to provide opportunities for you to seek and discover your destiny through soulful learning and compassion. For today and every day within you, The Spirit knows and holds the highest watch for you. You are one of the universal essence of Spirit and its substance. You are now accepting your rightful place in the world, and you are abundantly supplied with everything that makes for a beautiful and purposeful life. You are a child of the one Spirit and every attribute of it. Every attribute of good of God is your birthright. It is your divine inheritance. Boldly live your new story. So as we come back into the room, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And I want to say, and so it is. Namaste.